The first thing people notice is never the warning signs. It's the noise, the overlapping noise that hits all at once, the beeping scanners, the squeak of carts, the cough behind you, the child crying 3 lanes over, the fluorescent lights buzzing like insects trapped in glass. To everyone else, it's just a grocery store. To me, it's pressure stacking layer by layer, faster than my body can process. I can feel it building before anything visibly goes wrong. My hands tighten around the cart. Handle. My breathing shortens without permission. My thoughts stop lining up in clean rows and start colliding. I tell myself to finish fast. Milk, bread, 1 frozen meal, in and out. You've done this before, you can do it again, but the line is longer than expected. The registers are short-staffed. Someone sighs loudly behind me. Someone else bumps my heel with their cart and doesn't apologize. The lights flicker. Just once. That's enough. My chest locks. My ears start ringing like the store is underwater. I'm still standing. Still quiet. Still trying to pass as normal. That's when the voice comes from behind me. Loud. Confident, annoyed. What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like that? I freeze. My shoulders pull inward. I know better than to turn around. If I turn, I'll lose control of my face. My jaw is clenched so hard it hurts. The cashier looks past me, waiting. My card is already in my hand, but my fingers won't cooperate. They feel thick, disconnected. Someone laughs. Not cruel, not kind, just dismissive. Probably faking something to skip the line. That's when it happens. The words that land heavier than the noise, heavier than the lights, heavier than the pressure in my lungs. Autism isn't like that. He's just being dramatic. People fake that stuff all the time. My stomach drops. My vision narrows. It's not the first time I've heard it. But hearing it in public, surrounded by strangers with nowhere to escape, flips a switch inside me. I'm no longer just overwhelmed. I'm exposed, judged, cornered. My breathing turns shallow. My hands start shaking. The cart rattles softly as my grip loosens. Someone clears their throat impatiently. Can you hurry up? The cashier says it gently, but it still lands like pressure. I want to explain. I want to say something, anything, but speech is gone, not delayed, gone. My mouth opens and nothing comes out. The store feels smaller, the walls closer, the sounds louder. My heart is pounding so hard I'm afraid people can see it through my shirt. I step back instinctively, bump into another cart. See? The same voice says. He's doing it on purpose. That's when the security guard approaches. Calm face, hands clasped, authority in his posture. Sir, is there a problem? I try to shake my head. My neck barely moves. My eyes are locked on the floor tiles, counting the cracks to stay grounded. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't hear my own breathing anymore, only the rush in my ears. Someone says, he's autistic. The guard sighs. Not angry. Worse. Tired. Sir, he says again, louder, you need to cooperate or we'll have to ask you to leave. Leave. The word hits like a threat. Leaving means walking through the crowd, through the noise, through the judgment. My legs feel weak. I press my thumb hard into my palm, a grounding trick I've used since childhood. It barely helps. My vision blurs. The cart slips from my hands and rolls forward an inch. The sound echoes. Too loud. Too sharp. A woman scoffs. Unbelievable, people will fake anything for attention. And then, without warning, my body gives up on pretending. My knees buckle slightly. I grab the counter to stay upright. My breathing breaks into sharp, uneven gasps. Not loud, not dramatic, but real, raw, uncontrolled. The store goes quieter, not because the noise stops, but because my brain can't process it anymore. I'm on the edge now, the place where one more word could push me into a full shutdown. And that's when someone says it, not to me, about me. Isn't this on camera? The guard pauses. The cashier glances up. The register camera mounted above the screen has been recording the entire time. My hands shaking, my eyes unfocused. The moment my speech vanished. The moment the accusations started. The moment my body stopped obeying. No performance, no acting. Just a nervous system in overload. I don't know it yet. But everything that was said, everything that was assumed, everything that was whispered, with certainty, is about to collide with evidence. And the people who were so sure I was faking are about to watch themselves be wrong. If you want to support stories like this and help invisible realities be seen, take a second to subscribe and leave a like. It helps more than you think. The first thing people notice is never the warning signs. It's the noise, the overlapping noise that hits all at once, without mercy, without sequence, the scanners beeping in uneven rhythms, the squeal of cart, wheels that haven't been oiled in years, the low hum of refrigerators along the frozen aisle, a child crying somewhere behind the bread section, a phone ringing and not being answered, the fluorescent lights above buzzing faintly, constantly, like something alive that refuses to stop. To everyone else, it's just a grocery store on a normal day. To me, it's a storm building in layers, each sound stacking on top of the last until my nervous system has nowhere left to put it. I feel it before anything looks wrong from the outside. That's the part people never understand. There is no single trigger. There is no dramatic moment at first. It's gradual. My shoulders tighten without me telling them to. My jaw locks. My tongue presses against the roof of my mouth as if holding words in place even though I don't plan to speak. My hands grip the cart handle harder than necessary, knuckles whitening because pressure is grounding. Because pressure reminds my body that I still exist inside it. I tell myself the same script I always do. Finish fast. Don't browse. Don't hesitate. Milk, bread, one frozen meal, pay and leave, in and out. You've done this before. You can do it again. And that part is true. I have done this before, many times. That's what makes it worse when it starts to go wrong. Because people assume that if you've done something once, you can always do it again. They don't see the cost. They don't see what it takes. The line is longer than expected. 2 registers. Closed. One cashier moving slower than usual, scanning, stopping, rescanning, a customer arguing about a coupon. The line barely moves. My chest tightens a little more. Someone behind me shifts their weight and exhales loudly, the universal sound of impatience. A cart bumps lightly into my heel, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to register. No apology, just silence. My brain flags it as danger anyway. The lights flicker once, just a blink. To anyone else, nothing. To me, it's like someone snapped a rubber band inside my head. My breathing shortens. I feel the air getting stuck halfway in. My thoughts stop lining up in clean rows and start overlapping, colliding, repeating. Stay still. Don't rock. Don't draw attention. Don't make it worse. I'm still quiet. Still standing. Still doing everything I've learned to do to pass as normal. That's the part people mistake for ease. They see someone silent and assume calm. They don't see the effort it takes to stay that way. Then the voice comes from behind me. It's loud enough that I don't have to turn around to know it's directed at me. Confident, annoyed, comfortable being heard. What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like that? My spine stiffens instantly. I freeze, the way prey freezes. Not because it helps, but because it's automatic. My shoulders curl inward. I know better than to turn around. If I turn, I'll lose control of my face. My expressions don't obey social rules when I'm overloaded. My jaw clenches harder to the point where it aches. The cashier glances at me, then past me, then back to her screen. My card is already in my hand, but my fingers won't cooperate. They feel thick, delayed, like they belong to someone else. I try to align the card with the reader and miss. Once. Twice. Someone chuckles behind me. Not cruel, not kind, just dismissive. The kind of laugh that says you are an inconvenience, not a person. Probably faking something to skip the line. That's when the words hit. The ones that land heavier than the noise, heavier than the lights, heavier than the pressure in my lungs. Autism isn't like that. He's just being dramatic. People fake that stuff all the time. My stomach drops so fast it feels like falling. My vision narrows at the edges. I've heard it before. Friends of friends, online comments, strangers who think a diagnosis has to look a certain way to be real. But hearing it here, in public, surrounded by people who now feel entitled to judge me, with nowhere to retreat, flips something inside me. I'm no longer just overwhelmed. I'm exposed. My breathing turns shallow, sharp. My hands start shaking in small, uncontrollable bursts. The cart rattles softly as my grip loosens and tightens again. Someone clears their throat, exaggerated. "Can you hurry up?" The cashier says it gently. I know she doesn't mean harm, but intent doesn't matter when your system is already overloaded. The words land like weight. I want to explain. I want to say, "I'm autistic," or "I'm having trouble," or anything that would make this stop escalating. But speech is gone. Not delayed. Not stuck behind anxiety. Gone. My mouth opens and nothing comes out. No sound, no word. Just air. The store feels smaller. The walls closer. The sounds louder, sharper, less organized. My heart is pounding so hard, I'm afraid people can see it through my shirt. I step back instinctively and bump into another cart. "See?" the same voice says. "He's doing it on purpose." That's when the security guard approaches. Calm expression, hands clasped in front of him, authority in his posture, the kind of presence that usually quiets a situation. "Sir, is there a problem?" I try to shake my head. My neck barely responds. My eyes lock onto the floor tiles instead, counting the cracks between them to stay grounded. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't hear my own breathing anymore, only the rushing sound in my ears. Someone answers for me. "He says he's autistic." The guard sighs. Not angry, worse. Tired. The sound of someone who has already decided what this is. "Sir," he says again, louder now, "you need to cooperate or we'll have to ask you to leave." Leave. The word hits like a threat. Leaving means moving. Moving means noise, eyes, space, judgment. My legs feel weak. I press my thumb hard into my palm. A grounding trick I've used since childhood. The pressure barely registers. My vision blurs slightly. The cart slips from my hands and rolls forward an inch. The sound it makes echoes too loudly in my head. A woman scoffs. "Unbelievable, people will fake anything for attention." And then my body gives up on pretending. My knees buckle just enough that I have to grab the counter to stay upright. My breathing breaks into sharp, uneven gasps. Not loud, not dramatic, but real, uncontrolled. The kind you can't fake because you can't stop it. The store doesn't actually get quieter, but my brain can't process the noise anymore. Everything blurs into one overwhelming wave. I'm right on the edge now. The place where one more word, one more sound could push me into a full shutdown. Then someone says it, not to me, about me. "Isn't this on camera?" The guard pauses. The cashier looks up, then instinctively glances toward the small black dome mounted above the register. The camera, recording everything. My shaking hands, my unfocused eyes, the exact moment my speech disappeared. The moment the accusation started, the moment my body stopped obeying. No performance, no acting, just a nervous system in overload. I don't know it yet, but every assumption made in this line, every whispered judgment, every confident accusation is about to collide with evidence. And the people who were so sure I was faking are about to watch themselves be wrong. If stories like this matter to you, take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. It helps bring invisible realities into the light. The guard hesitates, just for a second, and that second feels heavier than everything before it. His eyes move again to the camera, then back to me. I'm still gripping the counter, knuckles white, chest rising in uneven jolts. My vision is tunneled now, the edges dark, the center too bright. I can feel people staring, but I can't look back. Eye contact would finish me. "Sir," the guard says, slower this time. Less authority, more uncertainty. Can you step aside with me?" Step aside means movement. It means changing position, changing sensory input, changing everything. My brain is desperately trying to hold still. I shake my head again, a tiny movement, barely visible. It's all I can manage. "I can't," I whisper. Or maybe I think it. I'm not even sure if sound comes out. Someone in the line mutters, "Unreal." Another voice says, "Just let him go. This is ridiculous." There's irritation now mixed with discomfort. People don't like scenes unless they're entertaining. This one isn't. This one makes them uneasy. The cashier quietly suspends the transaction. The beep of the register stopping is sharp, piercing. I flinch hard enough that my shoulders jerk upward. That movement draws more attention, which feeds the overload, which makes my breathing worse. It's a loop, tightening fast. The guard raises a hand slightly, a signal for the people behind me to calm down. "Give him some space," he says. A few steps shuffle backward. Not enough. Still too close, still too loud. Then something changes. The guard's radio crackles softly. He presses a button and murmurs something I can't hear. While he listens, his posture shifts. Not confrontational anymore, observational. He looks at me again, really looks this time. My hands shaking, my jaw clenched so tight a muscle is jumping. My eyes unfocused, not tracking anything specific. This doesn't look like acting. The guard lowers his voice. "Sir, are you diagnosed?" The question itself is too much. Words pile up in my head with nowhere to go. Yes, since childhood, papers, doctors, assessments, therapy. Years of learning how to survive places like this. None of it comes out. I nod once, sharp, too fast. Behind me, the woman who scoffed earlier lets out a small laugh. Nervous now. Anyone can say that. The guard doesn't respond to her. That silence is loud. He glances up again at the camera. Then he makes a decision. "Okay," he says, turning slightly toward the cashier. "Can we pause this lane?" The cashier nods immediately. Relief flashes across her face. She presses a few buttons. The light above the register switches off. The line groans collectively. "What? Why?" someone complains. "For a medical situation," the guard says, firm now. "You can move to another register." There's resistance, but authority wins. Carts roll away. The pressure behind me eases just a little. Not enough to fix anything, but enough to stop the spiral from accelerating. The guard steps closer, but not too close. He crouches slightly, lowering himself to my level. "You're safe," he says quietly. "You're not. In trouble. Safe." The word barely registers, but it does something. My breathing stutters, then slows by a fraction. Still bad, still uneven, but no longer free-falling. "I'm going to ask you something," he continues. "You don't have to answer out loud. Just nod or shake your head, okay?" I nod. This I can do. "Do you need to sit down?" "Yes." I nod again, sharper this time. He gestures to a small bench near the customer service desk, a few steps away. The distance looks impossible. My legs feel like they're filled with water. "Take your time," he says. "No rush." Time doesn't mean much in this state, but permission does. Slowly, awkwardly, I release the counter and take one step. The floor feels wrong under my feet, like it's tilting. I make it to the bench and sit heavily, elbows on my knees, head down. The noise is still there, but it's farther away now. Muffled by distance and position, my hands are shaking violently. I press them between my knees to contain the movement. The guard stands nearby, not hovering, not leaving. Presence without pressure. At the register, another employee is talking quietly to the cashier, gesturing toward the camera. I hear fragments. Playback. Timestamp. Earlier. Someone is watching the footage. I don't know that yet. I'm too busy trying to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Count. 4 in, 6 out. My chest resists, but I force it. Again and again. Slowly, the ringing in my ears softens. My vision widens just enough that I can see the guard's shoes, the edge of the counter, the movement of people in the periphery. I hear voices again, not directed at me, about me. Wow, he really lost it. That looked serious. Maybe he wasn't faking. The last one is quiet, uncertain, almost ashamed. A few minutes pass, or maybe it's longer. Time stretches strangely during overload. Eventually, the guard's radio crackles again. He listens, nods, then walks toward the register where the cashier and a manager are now, standing, eyes fixed on a small screen angled upward. They're watching it. The moment my card slipped. The moment my hand started shaking. The moment my mouth opened and nothing came out. The accusations, the laughter, the scoff, all of it. The manager's face tightens, the kind of expression people get when they realize they were wrong publicly. The guard turns back toward the line that is partially reformed at the neighboring register. "Sir," he says, pointing, not at me, but at the man who first spoke up. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" The man blinks. "Me?" "Yes," the guard says, calm, firm. "You." The entire store seems to lean in. The man looks around first, as if hoping the guard is talking to someone else. No one meets his eyes. The people nearby suddenly find the candy racks and magazine covers very interesting. Slowly, reluctantly, he steps forward. "I didn't do anything," he says, already defensive. "I was just saying what everyone was thinking." The guard doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. "What you were thinking," he says evenly, "or what you said out loud." There's a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to make the answer obvious. The manager turns the small screen slightly so it faces them both. I can't see it from the bench, but I don't need to. I know exactly what's on it. I was there. My body remembers every second. The man squints at the screen. At first, he scoffs, a short sound, reflexive. Then his expression changes. Subtle but noticeable. His mouth tightens. His shoulders stiffen. He watches longer this time. The camera angle shows my hands shaking before anyone spoke. It shows my eyes unfocused, fixed on the card reader. It shows my mouth opening and closing with nothing coming out. It shows the moment I flinched when someone laughed. It shows the exact second my knees buckled and I grabbed the counter to stay upright. There is no drama, no exaggeration, no performance, just collapse. "That," the guard says quietly, pointing at the screen, "started before you opened your mouth." The man swallows. "Well, I didn't know." The manager finally speaks. "You didn't ask either." Silence spreads outward, thick and uncomfortable. The woman who scoffed earlier shifts her weight from one foot to the other. Her arms, once crossed tightly, are now hanging awkwardly at her sides. She clears her throat. "I mean, I've never seen autism look like that." The guard turns toward her. Not angry, not accusing, just factual. "That's because you've never had to live in his body." No one laughs this time. On the bench, my breathing continues to slow, though my muscles still tremble. The worst of the overload has passed, but the aftermath is heavy. Like my system ran a marathon without telling me. Every sound feels distant, every movement delayed. The guard returns to my side. He crouches again. "We're handling it," he says softly. "You're okay?" I nod once. It's all I have. "Would you like to finish your purchase? Somewhere quieter," he asks. "Or would you prefer to leave your items and go?" The choice matters. Control matters. I think for a moment. The bench, the distance, the lowered lights near customer service. I nod again, slower this time. "Okay," he says. "We'll bring it to you." The cashier appears a moment later, carrying my small basket instead of the cart. She kneels slightly when she speaks, instinctively lowering herself the way people do when they finally understand someone is vulnerable, not difficult. "I'm really sorry," she says, not scripted, real. "Take your time." She sets the basket on the counter near the bench and steps back without another word. Behind her, the line has resumed, but it's different now. Quieter. People avoid looking in my direction, not out of annoyance anymore, but embarrassment. A few glances linger too long, then drop quickly. The man who first accused me stands near the magazine rack, arms folded again, but this time the posture looks defensive, not confident. He doesn't speak. He doesn't meet anyone's eyes. I slowly reach into my pocket and pull out my card again. My fingers are still shaky, but they respond. The cashier brings the portable reader over, holds it steady so I don't have to. The machine beeps softly. Once, approving. That small sound feels enormous. The receipt prints. She folds it and sets it gently on top of the basket instead of handing it directly to me. A quiet accommodation I didn't have to ask for. As I stand, my legs wobble, but they hold. The guard walks beside me toward the exit, not escorting, not rushing. Just there. As we pass the line, the woman who laughed earlier speaks again, her voice lower now. "I'm sorry," she says. The word sounds unfamiliar in her mouth. "I didn't realize." I don't respond, not because I don't hear her, but because I don't owe her anything. The guard doesn't push for it. He just nods once, acknowledging the moment without forcing closure. The doors slide open. Fresh air hits. My face. Cooler. Quieter. My lungs expand fully for the first time since I entered the store. Outside, I stop and lean against the wall. My body sags now that it's safe to do so. The guard stands a few feet away. "You did nothing wrong," he says. I nod again. This time I believe it. Inside, the store continues. Carts roll, scanners beep, people move on. But something has shifted, at least for a few of them, at least for today. I pick up my bag, take one slow step forward, then another. The world feels fragile but manageable again. And behind me, in a grocery store that thought it had seen someone faking, there's now proof that invisible doesn't mean unreal. In the days that follow, my body keeps score even when my mind tries to move on. I wake up tense, jaw sore from clenching in my sleep. Ordinary sounds feel sharper than they should. A door closing too hard makes my heart jump. A car horn outside sends a ripple of adrenaline through my chest. This is what people don't see when they decide a moment is over. My nervous system doesn't reset just because the environment changed. It recalibrates slowly, cautiously, like it no longer trusts the world to behave. I replay the scene in fragments, never in order. The laugh comes back first, not the words, just the sound. Then the way the light flickered, then the guard's sigh, then the camera, the knowledge that everything was recorded, every tremor and breath and accusation preserved without opinion. I don't know how I feel about that. Part of me is grateful. Another part feels exposed in a way I didn't consent to. Proof is a double-edged thing. It protects you, but it also freezes you in time. A few days later, an email arrives from the store's corporate office. Longer than the first message, carefully worded, apologies layered with assurances, mentions of updated training modules and sensitivity reviews. It reads like progress wrapped in policy. I appreciate the effort, even if it feels distant. Systems move, slowly. Bodies do not. What changes faster is the way people look at me when they know. Friends who hear the story don't interrupt anymore. They don't offer fixes. They don't say, "But you seem fine." They ask questions instead. Not the invasive kind, the curious kind. What does it feel like when speech disappears? What helps when it starts? What makes it worse? I answer when I can. When I can't, they wait. That alone feels like relief. One evening, my sister comes over with takeout. She places the bags on the counter quietly, lining them up so nothing touches unexpectedly. She's learned the choreography over the years. We eat in near silence, the comfortable kind. After a while, she says, "I'm proud of you." I don't ask why. I know. Not because I endured it, but because I didn't apologize for it. Later, lying in bed, I think about the man in the line again, about the certainty in his voice, the way he spoke like a verdict had already been reached. People like to believe confidence equals truth. They like stories that resolve quickly, with clear villains and lessons learned. Real life is messier. He may go home and tell the story differently. He may say the store overreacted. He may say you can't say anything anymore. Or he may say nothing at all. I'll never know. What I do know is that something small shifted that day. Not everywhere. Not permanently. But enough to matter. Enough that a sign went up. Enough that a cashier knelt instead of rushed. Enough that a guard chose observation over authority. Those choices add up. They always do. A week later, I need groceries again. I consider ordering delivery. It would be easier, safer. No lines, no lights, no people. But avoidance has a cost, too. It shrinks the world until it fits inside your fear. I decide to go back to the same store, not to prove anything, just to take the space back. I go at an off hour, early afternoon, fewer carts, fewer voices. The automatic doors open with the same soft whoosh. My chest tightens anyway. I pause just inside, letting my eyes adjust, letting my body map the room. It's quieter than before. Or maybe I'm better prepared. Both can be true. I keep my list short. I move deliberately. When the lights flicker again, my shoulders tense, but nothing tips. At the register, the cashier recognizes me. Not with pity, with awareness. She offers to open another lane. I shake my head. I can manage this one. She smiles and keeps her movements slow and predictable. Behind me, a man shifts impatiently. I feel the old warning spark, my fingers pressed together, grounding. The moment passes, no comments, no laughter, just the normal friction of shared space. I pay, the receipt prints, I breathe. Outside, the air feels like a reward. I sit in my car and notice something new. I'm tired, but I'm not shaking. My heart rate is elevated, but it's settling. This is what progress looks like, not absence of difficulty. Recovery that comes faster than before. That night, I write the AHM story down. Not to publish, not to perform, just to get it out of my head and onto a page where it can't ambush me anymore. The words come unevenly at first, then smoother. I don't dramatize, I don't soften. I let the facts stand. I describe the way speech vanished, the way certainty turned cruel, the way evidence changed the room. When I finish, I sit back and read it once. Then I close the file. It's enough. Weeks pass. The memory loses its sharpest edges. It becomes something I can touch without flinching. Occasionally, someone mentions a post they saw, a discussion about invisible disabilities. Sometimes I hear my story echoed back through someone else's words, slightly altered, slightly blurred. I don't correct them. Ownership isn't the point. Impact is. One afternoon, at a different store, I see a young person frozen at the self-checkout. Their hands hover uselessly over the screen. A line forms. Someone sighs. The old script threatens to repeat. Before it can, an employee steps in, gently, quietly, asking permission before touching anything. The line waits. No comments, no accusations, just patience. I don't know if that moment is connected to mine. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Change doesn't always leave fingerprints. Sometimes it just shows up as a pause where cruelty used to be. I walk past the doors into the daylight and think about how easy it would have been to be dismissed that day. How close I came to being escorted out, labeled a problem, erased by inconvenience. I think about how many people don't get a camera angle that helps them. How many leave believing the lie because it was said louder than the truth. That's why this matters. Not because one person was vindicated, but because a pattern cracked. Because certainty met reality and didn't survive intact. Because the next time someone says, "He's faking," there's a story somewhere in the back of their mind whispering, "Maybe not." Invisible doesn't mean unreal. And sometimes, the truth waits quietly above a register, recording, until the world is forced to look. The following months teach me something I didn't expect. That recovery isn't linear, and neither is courage. Some days I feel stronger, almost untouched by what happened. Other days the memory creeps back in sideways, triggered by something small and stupid, like the beep of a scanner in a video, or the buzz of bad lighting in an office hallway. My body reacts before my mind has a chance to argue. That's how it works. Logic lives slower than nerves. I start paying closer attention to how often people say things without thinking. In conversations, online, in passing. Everyone's autistic now. People just want attention. Back in my day, we didn't have all this. The words are casual, almost lazy. They're said without malice most of the time, which somehow makes them heavier. Because it means the harm isn't accidental. It's normalized. I notice it at work, too. Meetings that run long without breaks. Bright. Lights that no one questions. Open offices designed for collaboration but built like sensory traps. I mask, smile, nod. I contribute. People praise my focus, my attention to detail. They don't see the cost of maintaining it. They don't see how much energy it takes to look effortless. One afternoon, a coworker makes a joke about someone having a meltdown over nothing. The room laughs politely. My stomach tightens. I don't laugh. I don't correct him either. Not that day. I'm still learning when to speak and when to preserve myself. Both are survival skills. What changes slowly is my relationship with shame. For years it sat quietly in the background, whispering that if I just tried harder, I could be easier to deal with. That my struggles were inconveniences I needed to manage privately. The grocery store incident cracked that belief open, not all at once, not cleanly, but enough to let light in. I didn't fake anything that day. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't manipulate. My body reacted honestly to an environment that overwhelmed it. The shame wasn't mine. It never was. I start making small adjustments without apologizing for them. I wear noise-reducing headphones in public more often. I step outside during long gatherings instead of pushing through. I ask for instructions in writing. Some people notice. A few raise eyebrows. Most don't care. The world doesn't end. One evening, I'm invited to a friend's birthday dinner at a busy restaurant. Old me would have declined, automatically. New me hesitates, then accepts with conditions. I arrive early. I choose my seat carefully. I let the host know I may step out if it gets too loud. She nods without question. No explanations demanded, no jokes made. When the place fills up and the noise rises, my chest tightens, but I catch it early. I excuse myself, step outside, breathe, return. No one comments. The night continues. I stay longer than I expected. I leave tired, but intact. On the walk home, I realize something important. The difference wasn't the environment, it was the response. When people don't challenge your reality, your nervous system doesn't have to fight on two fronts at once. Weeks later, I receive a short message from the store again. This time, it's not corporate, it's personal. The cashier from that day found my email through the manager and asked if she could reach out. I hesitate before replying, then agree. Her message is long and careful. She apologizes again, but differently this time. She tells me she went home shaken that day, that she hadn't realized how quickly a situation could escalate, that she's been more attentive since. She thanks me for not yelling, for not blaming her, for staying human even when others didn't. I read it slowly. I don't feel angry. I don't feel vindicated. I feel seen, not as a symbol, not as a lesson, just as a person whose experience mattered enough to change someone else's behavior. I reply simply. I thank her for listening, for learning, for trying. That feels like enough. Life doesn't turn into a montage of understanding and acceptance after that. There are still hard days. There are still stares, still misunderstandings, still moments when someone says the wrong thing with the wrong confidence. But now, when it happens, I have a reference point, proof that I'm not imagining it, that I'm not alone in seeing the problem. I think often about the camera, about how strange it is that truth needed a lens to be believed, about how many people never get that validation. No footage, no witnesses willing to reconsider, just a story swallowed by noise. That's why I tell it now. Not because it's dramatic, not because it ends neatly, but because it's ordinary, because it happens in grocery stores and offices and lines and classrooms every day, because invisibility doesn't make something rare. It makes it easier to ignore. The next time someone freezes in a line, struggles with words, reacts in a way that doesn't make sense to you, I hope this story sits somewhere in your memory. Not loudly, not accusingly, just enough to slow your judgment, enough to replace certainty with curiosity. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room isn't the person losing control. It's the person who thinks they already understand what they're seeing. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is the truth being allowed to exist long enough to be recognized. As more time passes, the memory of that day settles into something heavier but steadier. It no longer crashes into me without warning, but it never fully disappears either. Instead, it becomes a lens through which I start noticing patterns I once ignored. Small moments, side comments, assumptions that float through conversations unchecked. I hear them everywhere now, once my ear is trained to them. At the pharmacy, a woman complains loudly about someone blocking the counter for no reason. On public transport, a man mutters that people are too sensitive these days. In a waiting room, someone jokes about anxiety being an excuse. None of these moments are about me, and yet all of them are. They echo the same idea, that discomfort only counts when it looks familiar. I start paying attention to how often people confuse inconvenience with dishonesty. If someone moves slowly, they must be lazy. If someone avoids eye contact, they must be rude. If someone reacts strongly, they must be exaggerating. There's comfort in those assumptions. They keep the world simple. They protect people from having to imagine lives different from their own. What surprises me is how often silence is mistaken for agreement. When no one pushes back, the loudest explanation wins. That day in the grocery store, certainty filled the space faster than empathy ever could, until it didn't. Until reality forced itself into the conversation. I begin to understand that what hurt most wasn't the accusation itself. It was the confidence behind it. the way strangers felt entitled to define my experience without hesitation, the way they spoke as if autism were a costume someone could put on and take off at will. That kind of certainty doesn't come from ignorance alone. It comes from a culture that rewards quick judgments. I don't suddenly become an advocate in the public sense. I don't give speeches or correct every comment I hear. But I do start choosing my moments more intentionally. When someone I trust repeats a harmful idea, I pause the conversation. I ask where that belief came from. I describe what overload feels like, not poetically, not dramatically, but practically, like a system error, like too many tabs open at once. Sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't. But I stop measuring success by immediate understanding. Seeds don't grow on command. One afternoon, during a routine appointment, a nurse asks me to rate my stress on a scale from 1 to 10. I hesitate. Numbers feel wrong. They always have. It depends, I say. Compared to what? She smiles, patient. That's fair. It's such a small thing, but it matters. No sigh, no rush, no correction. Just acceptance of complexity. I realize how rare that still is. At home, I reorganize my space. I make it quieter, softer, predictable. I move lamps so I don't rely on overhead lights. I keep headphones by the door. I plan exits before entries. These are things I've always done, but now I do them without the undercurrent of guilt. I'm not preparing for failure. I'm setting myself up to succeed. There are setbacks, of course. Days when the grocery store feels impossible again. Days when the world is too sharp. On those days, I don't push. I don't punish myself for retreating. Rest becomes part of the process, not a sign that I've lost ground. Months after the incident, I run into the security guard by chance. Different store, different context. He recognizes me immediately. I see it in the way his posture shifts. His expression softens. "Hey," he says, "I remember you." I brace myself, unsure what comes next. "I just wanted you to know," he continues. "That day stuck with me. I handle things differently now." I nod. Words aren't necessary. The moment is brief, respectful. He doesn't apologize again. He doesn't ask for validation. He just states a change and lets it stand. Walking away, I feel something unexpected. Not closure, but continuity. Proof that moments don't vanish when they end. They ripple. I think again about how close I came to being labeled a problem and removed from that store. How easily the story could have ended with me escorted out, humiliated, doubting myself. The camera mattered, but so did the pause. The moment someone stopped assuming and started observing. That's what I wish more people understood. You don't need proof to be kind. You don't need evidence to withhold judgment. Curiosity costs nothing. Silence, sometimes, is the most generous response. I imagine the next person in that line, or another line, another store, another place, where the noise stacks too high. Maybe they won't have a camera angle that helps them. Maybe no one will intervene. Or maybe, because of one small shift, someone will choose patience instead of accusation. That possibility is enough to keep me going back out into the world, even when it feels risky. Not because I trust the world completely, but because I trust myself more now. My experience doesn't need permission to be real. The memory of that day no longer feels like something that happened to me. It feels like something that passed through me and kept moving, changing the shape of things as it went, quietly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And in a world that often mistakes volume for truth, that quiet persistence matters more than people realize. As the seasons change, I notice how my relationship with public spaces keeps evolving. It isn't dramatic. There's no single moment where fear disappears or confidence suddenly replaces it. Instead, there's a slow accumulation of small choices. I learn which hours are quieter. I memorize which stores have softer lighting. I notice which employees tend to rush and which ones naturally slow down when something feels off. I don't expect perfection anymore. I look for patterns. What stays with me most is how quickly people default to stories that protect their comfort. It's easier to believe someone is faking than to accept that the world isn't built for everyone equally. If the problem belongs to the individual, the system doesn't have to change. That realization makes a lot of casual cruelty make sense. I start reading more about how often autistic adults experience public humiliation, not because they are disruptive, but because they don't perform distress in a way that looks acceptable. Too quiet and you're suspicious, too loud and you're dramatic, too still and you're uncooperative, too reactive and you're unstable. There's no correct response once people decide your reality is negotiable. That day in the grocery store, my body chose stillness until it couldn't anymore, and when it broke, it didn't do so in a way that demanded sympathy. It simply stopped compensating. That's what people saw on camera. Not a spectacle, not a trick, just a nervous system hitting its limit. I think about how many times I've pushed past that limit in the past, without witnesses. How many times I made it home just in time to collapse privately, where no one could accuse me of exaggerating because no one was there at all. Those moments didn't leave evidence, but they were no less real. They just didn't inconvenience anyone else. Sometimes I wonder how different my life would have been if, growing up, adults had recognized overload for what it was instead of punishing me for it. If teachers had asked why instead of demanding compliance. If quiet distress had been taken as seriously as visible disruption. That's not bitterness talking. It's curiosity. A way of mapping how much energy I spent surviving environments instead of learning inside them. As I grow older, I stop trying to explain autism as a list of traits. I explain it as a relationship with input, sound, light, movement, expectation, unpredictability. The world speaks too loudly, too quickly, and too often all at once. My nervous system listens to everything whether I want it to or not. There is no volume knob, only coping strategies. Some people understand that immediately. Others nod politely and forget. A few push back, insisting that everyone feels overwhelmed sometimes. I let that comment pass more often now. Not because it's correct, but because I've learned that comparison is rarely a doorway to understanding. Experience isn't a competition. What surprises me most is how often kindness appears when certainty steps aside. On a train, a stranger moves their bag without being asked. At a cafe, a barista lowers their voice instinctively. At a library, someone notices my discomfort and offers a quieter corner. None of these people know my diagnosis. They just read the situation without judgment. They choose accommodation before accusation. Those moments don't erase the harder ones, but they balance them. They remind me that awareness doesn't always come from education. Sometimes it comes from attention. I also start noticing how often people apologize for needing help. They whisper requests. They justify accommodations. They shrink themselves preemptively. I recognize that instinct in myself. It's the reflex of someone who has learned that inconvenience is a moral failing. I work slowly to unlearn it. When I do speak about what happened at the store, I'm careful not to frame it as a victory. It wasn't a win. No one gained anything that day except understanding, and even that came late. It was a correction, a moment where an incorrect assumption was interrupted before it became permanent damage. I think about how easily it could have gone the other way, how quickly authority can solidify the wrong narrative, how often people like me are removed, restrained, or dismissed before anyone bothers to look closely. The camera mattered, but the willingness to look mattered more. Every so often, I catch myself hesitating before entering a store again. The memory surfaces like a warning, and then I remind myself that fear doesn't mean stop. It means proceed with care. I don't owe the world my comfort, but I don't owe it my disappearance either, so I keep going, carefully, thoughtfully, on my own terms. I don't expect strangers to understand autism in full. I don't expect perfect responses. What I hope for is something smaller and more powerful: the pause, the moment before judgment, the willingness to ask instead of accuse, the restraint to say nothing at all when you don't know. That pause is where humanity lives. That day in the grocery store taught me that evidence can change minds, but empathy can change outcomes faster. It taught me that invisible doesn't mean unreal, and silence doesn't mean absence. It taught me that the most dangerous assumption is thinking you already understand someone else's experience. And it taught me something else, too. That even when the world misunderstands you loudly, your reality doesn't vanish. It waits, steady, intact, until someone is willing to see it. Time keeps moving, whether I'm ready for it or not. That's one of the strange comforts of it. The world doesn't pause to analyze what happened in a grocery store aisle, but the ripples keep traveling. Anyway, quietly, invisibly, just like everything else people struggle to notice. I begin to realize that the incident didn't just change how I move through public spaces, it changed how I interpret reactions. Before, every sigh felt personal, every glance felt accusatory. Now I see more nuance. Some people are impatient, some are uncomfortable, some are simply unaware, and a few are willing to learn if they're given a reason to stop and look. I think a lot about that word. Look, not stare, not judge. Just look long enough to notice details: shaking hands, delayed responses, the way someone's eyes lose focus when the noise gets too loud. Those details were always there. The camera didn't create them, it just refused to ignore them. I start volunteering quietly at a local community center once a week, not as a spokesperson, not as a symbol, just as another person helping organize supplies, straighten shelves, prepare rooms. The environment is calmer, predictable. People speak softer without being asked. Nobody rushes me. When I need to step outside, I do. Nobody questions it. That kind of space heals in ways therapy never fully could. One afternoon, a teenager freezes in the doorway during a busy event. The room is loud. Chairs scrape. People talk over each other. I see it immediately, the way their shoulders pull inward, the way their breathing shortens. I don't rush them. I don't touch them. I stand nearby and lower my voice. "You can come in when you're ready," I say, or not at all. Either is fine. They look at me like I've just removed a weight they didn't know they were carrying. They step in a minute later. Or maybe it's longer. Time behaves strangely in those moments. I don't keep track. That night, driving home, I realized something important. I didn't need a diagnosis to recognize what was happening. I needed attention, patience, the willingness to assume there might be a reason I couldn't see yet. That's it. That's the entire skill. I think back to the grocery store again, not with anger now, but with clarity. The people in that line weren't monsters. They were operating on shortcuts. Mental rules designed to keep life efficient. Those rules fail when reality doesn't match the template. Instead of adjusting the rule, people often blame the person who breaks it. Efficiency over empathy. Speed over understanding. Those priorities are built into everything. Lines, systems, policies, schedules. Anyone who can't keep up becomes a problem to solve instead of a person to support. Once I see it, I can't unsee it. I notice how often instructions are given verbally and once. How often expectations are implied instead of explained. How often help is offered only after someone has already failed publicly. None of this is malicious, it's just thoughtless. But thoughtlessness has consequences. Some days I feel strong enough to push back gently, to say, that doesn't always look the way you think, or there might be more going on than you realize. Other days I conserve my energy and let the moment pass. Both choices are valid. Survival isn't a performance. Months later, I return to the same grocery store without planning to. It's not intentional. I'm nearby. I need one item. The automatic doors open, and the familiar sounds rush toward me. My body reacts, but it doesn't panic. I take a breath. I scan the space. I orient myself. The sign near the register is still there. Small. Easy to miss. But present. I don't go to the same lane. I choose another. The cashier doesn't recognize me. That's fine. I don't need to be remembered. I just need to exist without being questioned. The transaction is uneventful, beautifully boring. As I leave, I pass a man arguing loudly about a return policy. His voice carries. People stare. Nobody accuses him of faking anything. Nobody questions whether his frustration is real. I note that quietly. Emotion is acceptable when it fits familiar patterns. Outside, I sit in my car and laugh, softly to myself. Not because it's funny, because it's absurd. And because sometimes laughter is the only way to release pressure without breaking. The story continues to travel in ways I don't control. A friend tells a friend. Someone shares a similar experience. Patterns emerge. I hear about a woman escorted out of a mall for acting strange. A child restrained at school for not responding fast enough. An adult denied service for not making eye contact. Different places. Same logic. I stop, thinking of my experience as isolated. It's part of a larger system that struggles with anything it can't quickly categorize. That realization is sobering, but also grounding. It means the problem was never just me. When I speak now, when I choose to, I speak less about labels and more about process, about how overload builds, about how speech can disappear, about how compliance isn't always possible, even when intent is there. I watch people's faces change when they understand that these reactions aren't choices. They're responses. Some people still resist. They say things like, well, everyone has to deal with discomfort. I don't argue. I just nod and say, yes. And some people are dealing with much more of it, much more often. That's usually enough to create a pause. Pauses matter. They create space. Space is where things shift. I learn to appreciate the quiet victories, the meetings where agendas are sent ahead of time, the stores that dim their lights for certain hours, the teachers who ask instead of assume. None of these things make headlines, but they change lives incrementally. On particularly hard days, when my nervous system feels frayed and thin, I remind myself of the bench near the customer service desk, of the moment the register light switched off, of the instant authority softened into curiosity. Those moments exist. I have proof, not just on camera, but in memory. And when I think about the man who accused me, I don't imagine confrontation anymore. I imagine him hesitating next time, hearing a story echo faintly, feeling uncertainty where certainty once lived. That's enough, because real change doesn't always look like apology. Sometimes it looks like silence where judgment used to be. Sometimes it looks like someone choosing not to speak. The world is still loud, still bright, still overwhelming. Autism doesn't fade because one situation resolved fairly, but my understanding of my place in it shifts. I take up space differently now. Less apologetically. More intentionally. I don't rush myself as much. I don't minimize my needs as quickly. I trust my body when it signals overload. I leave before collapse when I can. And when I can't, I know that collapse isn't failure. It's communication. I think again about that phrase, invisible but real. It isn't just about autism. It's about pain, fatigue, fear, conditions people carry quietly until something forces them into the open. The problem isn't that these things are invisible. The problem is that we treat invisibility as permission to doubt. As long as we reward certainty over curiosity, stories like mine will keep happening. In grocery stores, in airports, in schools, in workplaces, over and over again. But as long as people are willing to pause, to look, to listen, even briefly, those stories can also end differently. Mine did. And that matters more than anyone in that line could have known at the time. As months continue to pass, I realize the impact of those small shifts isn't always felt immediately, and that's okay. Not everything changes overnight. Not everyone will change either. That's one of the hard truths I've had to accept. We don't all progress at the same rate, and some people may never see things differently. But the small acts of kindness and awareness I've seen, whether from strangers, co-workers, or even the security guard, give me a quiet but constant reminder that change can be subtle and slow. It doesn't have to be dramatic to matter. I return to the store regularly, each time with more confidence, though it's never a complete absence of anxiety. It's not about erasing that discomfort. It's about finding a way to exist in a world that doesn't always understand. Sometimes I take a deep breath before I enter, grounding myself before the doors even open. Other times I hesitate just for a moment when I pass the aisles that remind me of the tension of that day. But each time I do something I didn't do before. I take up more space, I walk more purposefully, and I let myself exist without apologizing for it. There's a pattern in these interactions, small though they may seem. A few months ago, I noticed a familiar face behind the register. The same cashier from that day. She smiles when she sees me, and this time, it's not tentative. It's warm. She doesn't need to say anything. Her presence is a quiet acknowledgement of what happened, not just to me, but to all of us who witnessed the reality of invisible struggles that day. I don't feel the need to explain myself. She doesn't either. We both just exist in the space of shared understanding. That, in itself, is enough. One day, I return with a small list of items and no expectation. I'm not looking for acknowledgement. I'm just here for the routine. As I place the items on the conveyor belt, the cashier looks up and says softly, "It's good to see you again. I'm glad you came back." The sincerity in her voice catches me off guard. I wasn't expecting it, not in that moment, not after everything had been so quietly resolved. She could have said nothing at all, but she chose to say something. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like pity or patronization. It feels like a genuine moment of connection, something small but real. This interaction reminds me that the world isn't entirely indifferent to us. It isn't always hostile or cold. There are moments of humanity in the spaces we least expect them, and sometimes those moments are what allow us to move forward. I pay for my groceries and leave the store with a little more peace than I've had in months. I don't know if this will be my new normal, but it's a start. And then, as time goes on, I become more attuned to the people around me. I recognize how often I've been complicit in reinforcing the same quick judgments I once resented. We all do it. The world is designed to make it easy. But every time I pause, every time I choose empathy instead of assumption, I feel a bit more grounded. I feel like I'm building a better way to navigate this world that doesn't always make room for people like me. It's not about avoiding discomfort. It's about learning how to manage it, how to coexist with it. Because discomfort is part of life. It's part of being human. But when we rush past it, when we don't acknowledge it or allow others to express it, that's when harm happens. It's in the refusal to look deeper, to ask, "What's going on?" instead of, "What's wrong with you?" I think back to the comment I heard so often when I was growing up. Everyone has their own problems. And it's true, we do. We all carry something. But that doesn't mean we're all carrying the same weight. It doesn't mean we all struggle the same way or with the same tools. And it doesn't mean we should ignore or minimize the struggles of others because they don't look the way we expect. The invisible does not equal unreal. It simply means we don't always see it. But it's still there, and it matters. I start speaking more openly in safe spaces about my experiences. I talk about sensory overload. I talk about how much energy it takes just to appear normal. I explain that when my mind and body disconnect, it's not because I'm trying to cause a scene. It's because I'm overwhelmed and can't process everything at once. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't, but that's okay. I'm no longer speaking for their validation. I'm speaking for the truth of my experience. A few months later, I'm at a gathering, and someone mentions an encounter they had with someone else who seemed out of it. The conversation takes a turn, but this time, it's different. Instead of assuming that person was just acting out, someone says, "Maybe they were having a hard time. We don't always know what's going on with people." I don't respond. I don't need to. The shift is subtle but meaningful. Someone else has taken the time to pause and consider. And that's the change. Not the big, loud gestures, but the quiet recognition that everyone's experience is valid, even if we don't understand it completely. The following year, I decide to share my experience with a wider audience, not as a victim, but as someone who's lived through this invisible struggle. I write an article. I tell my story. Not just about the grocery store incident, but about everything that led up to it. I share how the world so often misunderstands the invisible struggles of others, and how much pain comes from being disregarded. The response is overwhelming. People who have experienced similar struggles reach out to me, thanking me for sharing, for putting words to their own experiences. Others are just learning about the realities of invisible disabilities, and they respond with open minds and a willingness to understand. When I speak, I don't seek applause. I don't need a standing ovation. What I need is for people to listen, to look and see, to pause and reflect. I need them to question what they know and to make space for others who have been ignored, silenced, or invalidated. It's not about giving people a platform to preach, but giving them the space to express their truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might make others feel. There are still moments of discomfort, moments when I wish the world were more understanding, more patient. But those moments are fewer now, and when they happen, I remind myself that discomfort doesn't have to be avoided. It just has to be acknowledged. Because that's where change happens. Not in the absence of discomfort, but in the willingness to sit with it, to learn from it, and to grow together. As I move through life, I carry the memory of that day with me, but it no longer weighs me down. It's become a part of my story, not the defining chapter. And in that story, I've learned that my voice, even when quiet, still matters. It's been heard. It's made an impact. And as long as I keep speaking, as long as I keep sharing, it will continue to matter. Invisible doesn't mean unreal. It simply means it's not always seen. But that doesn't make it any less real. The more distance I get from that day, the more clearly I can see how close it came to defining me in the wrong way. Not because of what happened, but because of what could have happened if the story had ended earlier, if the camera hadn't existed, if the guard hadn't paused, if authority had doubled down instead of looking again. Those are thin margins. Most people don't realize how often lives are redirected by seconds, by decisions made under pressure, by whether someone chooses certainty or curiosity. I start thinking about all the moments before the grocery store incident that trained me to stay quiet. Teachers who said I was capable but not trying. Employers who praised my work but criticized my demeanor. Strangers who read my silence as attitude. None of those moments were dramatic enough to remember on their own, but together, they formed a pattern. Stay small. Don't explain. Don't inconvenience anyone. Blend in or disappear. That mindset doesn't vanish overnight. Even after everything, I still catch myself rehearsing excuses in my head. If I need to leave early, if I need things repeated, if I need space, the reflex to justify is deep. It's built from years of being told, directly or indirectly, that my needs were negotiable. What changes slowly is my tolerance for that reflex. I begin noticing when I'm about to apologize for something that isn't wrong. When I'm about to minimize my experience to make someone else more comfortable. Each time I stop myself, it feels awkward, almost rude, but then it feels lighter, like I've put down a weight I wasn't meant to carry. I think often about the phrase functioning, how people use it as a measure of worth, high functioning, low functioning, as if the ability to endure discomfort quietly is the same as being okay. That day in the store, I was functioning right up until I wasn't. And when I stopped, people assumed deception instead of collapse. The camera showed the truth, but the truth had always been there. In quieter moments, I wonder how many others never get that correction. How many are labeled difficult, dramatic, unstable, or suspicious because their distress doesn't follow expected scripts. How many leave spaces believing the lie because no one challenged it. Those thoughts don't overwhelm me anymore, but they do sharpen my sense of responsibility. Not to educate everyone. Not to fix the system. Just to be honest when it's safe to be. I start choosing my words more carefully when I talk about autism. I stop leading with deficits. I stop listing symptoms like bullet points. I talk about capacity instead. About how much information my brain takes in. About how overload isn't weakness but saturation. About how shutdown is not refusal, but protection. Some people listen differently when it's framed that way. They stop asking, "Why can't you handle this?" and start asking, "What would help?" At a family gathering, someone asks me directly, "What should we do if that happens again?" The question surprises me, not because it's invasive, but because it assumes support instead of blame. I answer simply, "Give me time, lower the noise, don't talk over me, and don't argue with what I'm telling you I feel." They nod, and then they do it. It's not perfect, nothing is, but it's progress that doesn't require proof or performance, just trust. I also notice something else shifting. My memories of that day are no longer dominated by fear. They're dominated by clarity. I remember the moment the register light switched off, the moment the line dissolved, the moment authority softened. Those moments matter as much as the accusation itself. They remind me that intervention is possible even late in the process. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine an alternate version of that day. One where no one spoke up about the camera. One where I was escorted out. One where I went home convinced that I had done something wrong just by existing. That version still happens to people every day. The only difference is that this time, it didn't happen to me. That awareness doesn't make me grateful in a simple way. It makes me alert. It makes me attentive to moments where silence could harm someone else. I don't step in loudly. I don't confront aggressively. But I notice. And sometimes, noticing is enough to change the direction things take. I find myself less interested in being believed and more interested in being understood. Belief can be fragile. It often depends on evidence, authority, or narrative convenience. Understanding requires something deeper. It requires someone to accept that your experience doesn't need to resemble theirs to be valid. That day in the grocery store taught me that people are quick to fill gaps with assumptions. If behavior doesn't make sense, they invent a motive. Faking, manipulating, seeking attention. Those explanations are easy. They absolve observers from responsibility. They don't require adaptation. What takes effort is admitting, "I don't know what's happening, but something is." That sentence alone could change countless outcomes. As I move further away from that moment in time, I don't feel the need to relive it constantly. But I don't want to forget it either. Not because of the pain, but because of the lesson. In a world that prioritizes speed and certainty, the most radical act can be slowing down and staying unsure a little longer. I'm still autistic. That didn't change. I still experience overload. I still lose speech sometimes. I still navigate environments that weren't built with me in mind. What changed is my relationship to those facts. They are no longer something I feel compelled to hide at all costs. The grocery store wasn't the end of the story. It was a turning point. Not because it proved anything to strangers, but because it proved something to me, that my experience doesn't need permission to exist. That misunderstanding doesn't equal guilt, and that being seen, even briefly, can alter the trajectory of what comes next. That realization carries me forward, quietly, into whatever the next line might be. There's a strange kind of strength that comes after being misunderstood so completely, and then, finally, being seen. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly, changing how you stand, how you breathe, how you decide what you owe the world and what you don't. Before that day, I spent most of my energy trying to predict reactions. I watched faces constantly, scanning for irritation, impatience, boredom. I adjusted in advance. I softened myself before anyone asked. I learned to leave early, speak less, tolerate more. It wasn't conscious most of the time. It was muscle memory. Survival turned into habit. After the grocery store, that habit didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. I started noticing the moments where I was bracing for something that never came. A cashier who didn't rush me. A stranger who waited without sighing. A clerk who asked, "Do you need a minute?" Instead of, "What's the problem?" Those moments had probably always existed. I just hadn't trusted them enough to register them. I think often about how trust works when you're autistic. It isn't given easily, not because of fear, but because experience teaches you that your reality is frequently questioned. When you're told over and over that you're exaggerating, misinterpreting, overreacting, you learn to doubt your own internal signals. You stay in environments longer than you should. You push through sensations that are screaming at you to stop. You confuse endurance with strength. That day forced a confrontation between endurance and truth. My body stopped enduring. It chose truth instead. And the world, briefly, had no choice but to respond. I start applying that lesson in small ways. I leave places sooner. I decline invitations without explaining every detail. I stop forcing eye contact when it costs me focus. Each choice feels rebellious at first, like I'm breaking an unspoken rule. But nothing bad happens. The sky doesn't fall. People adjust more often than I was led to believe. At work, I ask for meetings to have agendas in advance. I ask for follow-ups in writing. I frame it as clarity, not accommodation. The difference matters. People respect clarity. They resist weakness. The problem was never the request. It was the narrative attached to it. I think about how many autistic adults never get the chance to reframe that narrative. How many are taught that asking for help confirms the worst assumptions about them? How many learn to survive at the expense of themselves? That thought stays with me, not as guilt, but as motivation to choose differently where I can. Sometimes I still feel anger when I remember the line in that store. Not explosive anger, a quieter one. The kind that comes from knowing how easily harm can happen when certainty goes unchecked. But that anger doesn't consume me anymore. It sharpens my boundaries instead. I become more comfortable saying, "That doesn't work for me." Full stop. No justification, no backstory. Just a statement of fact. The first few times I say it, my heart races as if I've done something dangerous. Over time, it becomes easier. Normal, even. One afternoon, I witness a moment that mirrors my own experience in an unsettling way. A woman at a pharmacy. Counter is struggling to answer a question. She looks overwhelmed, eyes darting, hands trembling slightly. Someone behind her mutters, "Unbelievable." The old tension tightens in my chest. I feel the urge to disappear, to mind my own business, to stay safe. Instead, I say something simple. She's doing her best. That's all. The muttering stops. The pharmacist slows down. The woman exhales, visibly. She doesn't thank me. She doesn't look at me. She doesn't need to. The moment shifts. Just enough. Walking away, I realize that intervention doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. It doesn't require confrontation. Sometimes it's just interrupting the narrative long enough for reality to reassert itself. I think about the camera again. How it didn't argue. It didn't accuse. It didn't explain. It just showed what was already there. In many ways, that's the role I start trying to play in my own life. Not defending my experience aggressively, but refusing to erase it. There's a temptation, after being validated, to chase that feeling again. To seek out moments where others acknowledge your truth. I resist that. Validation is powerful, but it can become another dependency if you're not careful. I don't want to need witnesses for my reality anymore. What I want is consistency. A life where I don't have to prepare for disbelief as the default. That life isn't fully possible yet. Not everywhere. Not all the time. But it's closer than it was. I stop measuring my progress by how well I blend in. I measure it by how quickly I recover when things go wrong. By how little shame I feel when my limits show. By how willing I am to take myself seriously even when others don't. The grocery store incident didn't cure anything. It didn't erase autism or make the world gentler overnight. What it did was strip away an illusion I didn't realize I was still carrying. The illusion that if I tried hard enough, I could earn unquestioned acceptance. Acceptance doesn't work that way. It's not earned through endurance. It's built through understanding, and sometimes through disruption. That disruption doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like someone pausing. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a register light switching off and a line being told to wait. I carry that image with me more than any accusation, because it proves something simple and profound. Systems can slow down. People can adapt. And when they do, the harm stops spreading. That knowledge doesn't make me fearless, but it makes me steadier. And steadiness, I'm learning, is its own kind of power. Over time, steadiness becomes something I recognize in my body before I recognize it in my thoughts. It shows up as a slower heartbeat when I enter crowded places, as the ability to pause instead of freezing, as a quieter inner voice that no longer panics at the first sign of misunderstanding. It doesn't mean the fear is gone. It means the fear no longer drives every decision. I start noticing how often people confuse confidence with correctness. The loudest person in a space is assumed to be right. The fastest explanation becomes the accepted one. That's what happened in that line. Someone spoke with certainty, and others followed, relieved to have a story that explained the discomfort quickly. What they didn't realize was that certainty can be just another form of avoidance. When something doesn't fit our expectations, it forces us to confront complexity. And complexity takes time. It asks us to slow down, to tolerate not knowing, to sit with uncertainty. Many people would rather be wrong than uncomfortable. That's not cruelty. It's conditioning. I think about how often autistic people are punished not for doing harm, but for disrupting flow, for interrupting efficiency, for existing in ways that don't align neatly with systems designed for speed and uniformity. A line must move. A transaction must finish. A response must come on time. Anything that delays those processes is treated as a problem to remove. That day, my body disrupted flow. Not intentionally, not strategically. It simply reached a limit, and instead of the system adjusting, the system tried to correct me. That's the default response. Until someone intervenes, I become more aware of these systems everywhere, In healthcare, where appointments are scheduled too tightly to allow for explanation. In education, where participation is measured by speed and verbal fluency. In workplaces, where collaboration often means constant exposure to noise and unpredictability. None of these structures are inherently malicious. They're just narrow, and narrow systems struggle with human variation. Understanding this changes how I relate to failure. When something goes wrong now, I ask a different question. Not, what did I do wrong? But what wasn't built to hold this? The answer is often illuminating and strangely relieving. I still have days when I retreat completely. When the world feels too sharp and I choose isolation over endurance. Those days used to feel like regression, like proof that I hadn't grown as much as I thought. Now I see them as maintenance. Rest isn't giving up, it's recalibrating. I also start to recognize another shift. My empathy for others deepens, but it becomes more discerning. I don't automatically absorb everyone's emotions anymore. I don't feel responsible for fixing every uncomfortable moment. I choose where to invest my energy. That choice is new and powerful. At a small gathering, someone makes an offhand comment about people playing the autism card. The phrase hits like a familiar bruise. The room goes quiet for a split second. I feel the old instinct to shrink. Instead, I take a breath and say calmly, "Most people would give anything not to have to explain themselves at all." The person blinks, surprised. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I say. And I do. I just want to be clear. The conversation moves on. No argument, no apology, just a subtle recalibration. Later, someone thanks me privately, not for educating them, for setting a boundary. I'm learning that boundaries don't always look like walls. Sometimes they look like statements that stand on their own without needing defense. Statements that don't ask permission to exist. As the months continue, the grocery store incident becomes something people reference when they talk about me, but less often. New experiences layer on top of it. Life expands again. That's important. I don't want to be defined by one moment, even a meaningful one. Still, when I think about the channel this story will live on, I understand why it resonates. It isn't about autism alone. It's about disbelief. About what happens when someone's lived reality is questioned publicly, about how quickly a crowd can decide who deserves empathy and who deserves scrutiny. The camera mattered because it interrupted a lie. But the deeper truth is this: people shouldn't need proof to be treated with dignity. Evidence should confirm, not grant, humanity. That's the part I hope lingers with anyone who hears this story. Not the drama. Not the confrontation, the pause, the moment where judgment could have continued, but didn't. I don't know where the man from that line is now. I don't know if he ever reconsidered his certainty. But I know this: his words lost their power the moment they were exposed to reality. And that's something no accusation survives. As for me, I keep moving. Forward, not faster, just more grounded. I take my time, I choose my spaces, I honor my limits, and when I'm misunderstood again, and I will be, I trust myself enough now to know that misunderstanding doesn't erase truth. Invisible things don't need to be loud to be real. They don't need permission. They exist whether or not the world is ready to acknowledge them. And sometimes, all it takes to shift everything is one moment where the noise stops, the assumptions fall quiet, and someone decides to actually look. As that understanding settles in, I begin to notice how much of my life was spent trying to be legible to others instead of livable for myself. I translated constantly. My tone, my reactions, my pauses. I edited myself in real time, hoping that if I could just be understood quickly enough, I wouldn't be questioned at all. What I'm learning now is that speed was never the problem. The demand for speed was. In that grocery store line, everything was expected to move forward, smoothly. Scan, pay, leave. When my body broke that rhythm, it wasn't just my struggle that unsettled people. It was the interruption itself, the reminder that humans don't always move at the pace systems demand. That reminder makes people uncomfortable. So they reach for explanations that restore order as fast as possible, even if those explanations are wrong. That's something I start seeing everywhere. When someone struggles, people ask what's wrong with them instead of what's happening to them. When someone reacts unexpectedly, people assume intent instead of overload. We're trained to locate problems inside individuals rather than in environments, expectations, or structures. I catch myself doing it too sometimes, making snap judgments, filling gaps with assumptions. The difference now is that I notice. And when I notice, I can stop. That pause has become one of the most valuable skills I've learned. I think about the idea of normalcy, how narrow it really is. Normal is just what a system is designed around. Anything outside that range feels disruptive, even when it's harmless. Autism exposes that flaw because it doesn't ask quietly. It shows in real time where flexibility ends and rigidity begins. That day, the system tried to correct me. When that failed, it tried to remove me. Only when evidence forced it to stop did it adapt. That order matters. It tells a story about priorities. What stays with me isn't resentment, it's clarity. I don't need to be exceptional to deserve patience. I don't need to perform distress correctly. I don't need witnesses to validate my limits. Those truths were always there, but now they're grounded in experience, not theory. I begin to think differently about advocacy. It isn't always about speaking louder or educating more aggressively. Sometimes it's about modeling a different response, slowing down, refusing to rush someone, treating confusion as information instead of failure. At a community meeting, someone takes a long time to answer a question. The facilitator shifts impatiently. I see the tension build. Before anyone can interrupt, I say, "We can give them a moment." It's a small sentence. It changes the room. The person finishes their thought. The meeting continues. No drama. Just space. I realize then how powerful permission can be. Permission to pause. Permission to take time. Permission to exist without justification. These are not luxuries. They are necessities for many people, even if they don't realize it. The grocery store incident has become less about what happened to me and more about what it revealed. About how fragile assumptions are when confronted with reality. About how quickly certainty dissolves when it meets evidence. About how much harm could be avoided if people chose curiosity first. I don't romanticize the experience. It was painful. It was exposing. It took something from me. But it also returned something I didn't know I'd lost. Trust in my own perception. For a long time, I questioned whether I was overreacting, misreading, exaggerating. Now, when my body signals overload, I listen. I don't argue. I don't negotiate. I respond. That shift changes everything. It changes how I plan my days, how I recover from social interaction, how I measure success. Success is no longer about pushing through. It's about coming back intact. As I approach the end of this story, I know it doesn't end cleanly. There's no final confrontation, no perfect resolution, just a gradual recalibration. A life lived with more honesty and less apology. There will be other lines, other stores, other moments where misunderstanding appears quickly and loudly. But there will also be pauses, interruptions, people who choose to look again. What I carry forward isn't hope in a vague sense. It's evidence. Evidence that narratives can be challenged, that systems can slow down, that one moment of attention can redirect an outcome. I'm still autistic, still navigating a world that wasn't built with me in mind. But I'm no longer trying to disappear inside it. And that, more than anything that happened on camera, is the truth that matters most. I didn't plan for this story to end where it's ending now. At first, it was just about surviving a moment that spiraled out of control. Then it became about being seen, then about understanding, and now, looking back, I realize it was always about something quieter and harder to name: permission. Permission to exist without explanation. Permission to take time. Permission to be believed without proof. The grocery store was never the real setting. It was just the place where everything collided. Expectations, impatience, certainty, fear. A place designed for speed, meeting a body that needed pause. When those two things met, something had to give. For a moment, it was me. Then finally, it was the assumption. What stays with me most isn't the accusation or even the relief of being proven right. It's the fragility of the situation. How easily it could have gone another way. How many times it already has for people who didn't have a camera, or a guard willing to pause, or a crowd forced to look at itself. That awareness doesn't make me bitter. It makes me careful. It makes me intentional about the way I move through the world and the way I witness others moving through it. I don't believe most people wake up wanting to hurt someone. I think most harm happens because people are uncomfortable with not knowing, with ambiguity, with experiences that don't fit their internal templates. When discomfort shows up, they rush to explain it away, faking, manipulating, overreacting. Those labels restore order quickly. They also erase people just as quickly. I've learned that erasure doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like confidence, like someone saying, "I know what this is," without ever asking. What I hope stays with you after hearing this isn't fear of saying the wrong thing. It's awareness of the pause before you say anything at all. That moment where you choose whether to assume or to observe, to judge or to wait, to label or to leave space. Because that pause is where outcomes change. I'm still navigating a world that overwhelms me. I still misjudge my limits sometimes. I still have days where the noise stacks too high and my body shuts down before my mind can intervene. Autism didn't disappear because one moment resolved fairly, but shame did loosen its grip. Doubt did lose its authority. I trust myself now in a way I didn't before. When my body says enough, I listen. When I need to step away, I step away. When I don't have words, I don't force them. I no longer measure my worth by how invisible I can make my needs. And when I'm misunderstood again, because I will be, I don't rush to correct the narrative at the expense of myself. I know the truth doesn't stop being real just because someone refuses to see it. This story isn't unique. That's the uncomfortable part. Versions of it happen every day. In lines, in classrooms, on buses, in hospitals, in workplaces, to people whose struggles don't look the way we expect them to people whose bodies respond honestly to environments that aren't built for them. The difference is rarely the condition itself. It's the response. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. When someone is struggling in front of you, the most powerful thing you can do is slow down. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need proof. You don't need to fix them. You just need to resist the urge to explain them away. Invisible does not mean unreal. Silence does not mean nothing is happening. And difference does not mean deception. That day, a camera showed the truth. But the truth was already there, waiting for someone to stop talking long enough to see it. If stories like this resonate with you, if you've ever been misunderstood, dismissed, or judged for something people couldn't see, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps this channel reach others who need to hear that they're not alone. And it helps remind the world that some of the most real struggles are the ones we don't immediately notice. Invisible, but real.